would say there's probably a lot of it that you don't need to have to be a good tech SEO. Do technical SEOs need to know how to code? No.
On today's episode, I'm joined by Sam Torres. She's currently the Chief Digital Officer of Grey Dot. Grey Dot is an SEO and data consulting agency. She's also been a speaker at MozCon and a specialist in technical SEO. Enjoy today's episode. I wanted to start by asking, for anyone who's new to your work, how do you introduce what you do at Grey Dot Company, and what does a Chief Digital Officer actually own in 2025?
So great question. So Grey Dot, we're a strategic and technical SEO agency, and then we work in a lot of things data. So whether it's going to be measurement all the way up to digital marketing research. Now, as far as the Chief Digital Officer, when we came up with that title, it's because I'm just nerdy and I touch all the products and usually vet any of the client work before it's sent over. So really was just trying to put together, it's not quite a CTO, but I'm doing more than a CIO. So it's just I do all the things, but CEO, because that's obviously Tori.
So everything, implementation, strategy, keeping updated with what's going on in the space of digital marketing, that's under your domain. And how has things changed for you in your role over the last 4 years? What are you spending most of your time on with your clients? Maybe you could also describe the kind of clients that you see. Feel free to name drop if you're allowed to.
Okay. Most of our clients, unfortunately, have NDAs, so I'm not allowed to name drop very often. But as far as the types of companies that we typically work with, we really specialize in working with embedded teams. So usually they've got an SEO team or at least a marketing team that's pretty advanced, and we're providing the guardrails or the consulting to make sure they're spending their time in the right places. That typically means that we work with tech companies or anybody who has any kind of compliance department. So we work with a lot of regulated industries just because we find those to be juicy and complex problems, and that's what we really like. As far as how has my job changed over the last 4 years? That's one of my favorite things about SEO is that it changes all the time. It's also one of my least favorite things about SEO is that it changes all the time. What's really been different for us, we've been really fortunate that we're always, like I say, because we work with embedded teams, we are usually spending a lot of time educating. So that hasn't really changed so much as maybe just what we're educating on. So it is trying to figure out what companies should do with AI, what makes sense, what things are worth the risks, what things are not. And the risks usually being, are you putting proprietary data or confidential information into them, are really the biggest problems that we see for enterprise clients. But as far as from the day-to-day, it is cool to have some of these tools to help us work maybe more efficiently. Like, I don't think I've handwritten an email in like a year and a half, and it's great. It saves me so much time. But there's still a lot of things that we're doing manually because either it's not the risk or you go through prompting hell. So all of that to say, a lot of the work itself is the same for us, just we're providing new angles and always thinking about the risks versus the benefits.
And I'm also assuming people are more willing to listen now.
Yeah, well, yes, we're also super lucky.
Training, right? And also
Yes.
explaining the importance of
Yeah.
SEO to these teams, to C-suite. And also, you mentioned regulated industries. Do you have examples of the kind of regulated industries and what their expectations are then? Like, what kind of content would they be ranking for or wanting to gain visibility for? Because it's a niche that you've sort of like focused on.
Good question. The things that happen there with regulated industries is usually trying to figure out what can we say versus what can we not. So like one of the companies we work with, they're not really a company, but we work with the Federal Reserve Bank. They're also interesting because they're not actually trying to make any money. They're just trying to educate and inform people. But so for example, that's one where we have to be careful about what kind of content are we putting out? Is it correct? So that's actually one of their biggest concerns with AI. Like, are LLMs hallucinating answers or quotes from the bank's president that the president didn't say, right? That's highly problematic for them. So that's where the concerns are coming from on that side. For other places in regulated industries, it is, hey, how do we work smarter? How do we scale? So that's one of the biggest questions too, of how do we continue to scale in an effective and meaningful way that feels authentic, but obviously doesn't take 400 people to create all that content. And then that really just becomes a question of what kind of inputs do you have and what information can we actually access that isn't crossing any kind of confidentiality or privacy walls. I'd say also those in regulated industries, they're a little bit more hesitant than, let's say, maybe our tech companies to just dive in and try things. And I mean, it makes sense, right? We've worked with mortgage companies, health tech, all kinds of stuff, and they just keep things a little bit closer to the chest.
There's more red tape and they're also more protective of how they're being presented. So how do you sort of, what's the research process like then for them? And also, I'm assuming there's also a lot of red tape on getting content approved. So what advice do you have for SEOs that either are working for internally for companies like this and trying to push content forward and face the red tape as an outsider that's, advising them, and also advice for other agencies working with companies like this?
Well, first, let's talk about what kind of the work. So, because with you nailed it, they're more concerned about what's being said about them or how they're being presented. So, we are doing a lot of entity analysis. So, we're looking at what is ChatGPT's understanding of their brand, for example, and the products that they offer or the services. So, we're doing a lot of that kind of research to try to identify where are the gaps. And a lot of times that will then go influence digital PR campaigns, or are there places in the content funnel that need to be closed up? Now, for getting that content approved, it's going to be honestly, the advice I give for working with developers as well is operate with empathy. Usually compliance is trying to make sure that that the brand doesn't get in any kind of trouble for liability. That as long as you're approaching the communication of like, all right, I understand we can't say this. How far can I go? Or also, there's a lot of times we get things approved because it's like, hey, we're presenting it this way. It's only a page title or only a meta description. And then really kind of visualize for the compliance department, because obviously this is not what they do, right? Search and SEO, it's not where they live. So really taking the time to say, hey, I want to target these keywords, but I understand we can't say that. So what about this creative way? Does that work? Coming to it with a let's find a solution together as opposed to trying to mandate or prescribe anything. It just doesn't work because they have their own things that they're worrying about. So I think operating with empathy and just coming to the table and saying, let's find a solution that we can work together. And then there are times where we've had clients with particularly stringent compliance and regulations. And so sometimes you just have to be able to say, hey, we can't say this. That's okay. Like we understand, but here's where we need to reset expectations for the client. Because there's definitely times where it's like, all right, you want to achieve these things. You can't because of XYZ. Let's figure out what plan B is going to be essentially, because it's just, we work in the world of the real and sometimes compliance and legal is going to win because they have to. So
So a lot of
hopefully that makes sense.
expectation management. And how do you sort of control the narrative on these LLMs? Because yeah, it's interesting that you pointed out earlier that these companies are very focused on not being misquoted, being fact checked, and but LLMs are notorious for hallucinating. So how maybe you can share some use cases? What sort of like guardrails do you put up, or how do you approach this and help them? You know,
So
Getting visibility in a right way.
yeah, it's a lot of trial by fire, right? So the first step is understanding what are all the different ways that LLMs are getting that information. So whether it's, the big three, and maybe you talked about this already, uh, there's the original training data, there's any of the web fetches or live searches that they do, and then user feedback, which obviously if you're in a user feedback loop, then that's the most unpredictable. The training data, I think the biggest thing for brands to understand that they often don't know is that the training data is introduced once a year at best, or at most, I should say. Right. I think it's been a while since we've had like a training data refresh. So a lot of the updates are coming from live fetches. So what's interesting is that we can now say if you're ranking well in Google, if you're ranking well in Bing, that's actually coming into play. So it's kind of fun that we've come back full circle and it's like just have good SEO, that'll help. And then for us, it is a lot of just trial and error. So doing our own searches, going across the different models, right? There's a ton of different tools that offer these things too.
Any tools that you use that you'd like to shout out?
Uh, So I know Fractal has a tool that they've put out that we like to use pretty often because of the clients that we have. They usually they are in control of their own tech stack. So we're trying, the Ahrefs, we're in the SEO Clarity AI visibility tool, Profound. Bluefish is actually one that I really like from a marketing perspective, maybe not an environmental perspective, because they actually do anywhere from like 100,000 to 250,000 prompts for your
Wow.
tracking. But as a brand, you don't actually have to give them 250,000 prompts. They just go ahead and generate them for you based on who are your target audiences and your products. And so I love that for like enterprise brands. But yeah, the environment implications, maybe not as much, but that's a whole other talk, right? So yeah, just trying and like I say, seeing where the gaps are in understanding. So for example, we're doing this with our own brand of how do people view Grey Dot? Do they know all the services that we offer? Where would they say we're a good fit versus not? And do those things make sense, right? Like that's the kind of, I guess, pushing that you want to do to understand where the gaps are. And then from there it is, are there places on your site where you're not being clear about who you are? Are you telling different stories? Are there inconsistencies on kind of your about pages, which historically as SEOs, we've kind of ignored, right? But are becoming a lot more important because it is that brand consistency that's super important. And then it's also the offsite. So what kind of things are people saying about you on Reddit, on YouTube comments, even on TikTok? Is there insight to glean from, from digital PR? What's your Wikipedia article look like? Does that align with who you actually are today, specifically for, or I should say particularly, words is hard for tech companies. They change pretty quickly. So making sure that those entities are staying up to date, that all ends up going into that work of brand consistency. And this is where I'd also say like digital PR, it has been something that, my colleagues in the UK and Europe, I think digital PR has played a heavier part in SEO programs for a number of years. And that is coming to the US, and we're seeing how important it is, right? And I'm not going to say the US hasn't had digital PR, right? There's still tons of that going on here, but I don't think it's had the same focus historically as it did in the UK, and now it's starting. So
The fact that you brought that up, I feel like, yeah, digital PR is definitely, I think, like the hottest sector in SEO the past year. It's
yes,
definitely grown in prominence. If we were to have this conversation, I would say even a year ago, we would not necessarily be talking about brand consistency around across all mentions on other platforms, right? The focus would have
yes,
been, what is your link building strategy? And now it's digital PR. And I think that's a very important, distinction on how things have shifted
yes,
in the industry. And it's a really good point that you brought across on like making sure you're auditing your online brand mentions across the internet and not just what you control, not just your own, knowing all about your own media. You mentioned some tools which were quite interesting. So Bluefin's not so favorable, a carbon footprint.
sure.
But that aside, what is in your tech stack when you're working with your clients? What are your go-tos? What's maybe the top 3 tools that you can't live without?
Ooh, okay. So yeah, this is where I'm not sure I'm going to have a super good answer for you because of the fact that, like I say, most of my clients are enterprise. We're super fortunate in that way. And so they have their own tech stacks. So we are adapting to whatever they already have. If clients come to us and they don't already have those things, then usually the first things we're recommending, we love Sitebulb for all things technical, just a great tool and really good for monitoring. Plus we work with the team closely. So it's like, if it doesn't do it yet, give it a couple of months. We'll ask Patrick and his team to develop it for us. For any kind of content work, we really love working with ClearScope, and that's one that we'll recommend. But everything else is usually our clients are coming to us with their tools already in place, and we'll help clients with determining tools, but that just changes from space to space.
Nice.
I
So
don't
your
have a
job is
really
just
answer.
basically trying out everything and just making it work. You're not even really allowed to have a favorite at this point.
Pretty much, yeah.
You're just given the cards and you have to deal with it. But it's
Yeah.
also fun because then you get exposure to the many different tools that are out there that are maybe sometimes a bit out of certain price brackets, right?
Yeah, like some of these tools as a small agency, there's no way I'd be able to afford these, right? But now I'm getting to play, learn how to use them, push on them. One of my favorite things is to figure out how to break the tools because that means you really
Interesting.
understand it, right?
Do you have a use case you'd like to share? Like what's your process when you try and break the tool? How do you push it to
Oh, well, so ClearScope actually is a great one. I'm talking with them for trying to figure out how to automate some things. And yeah, so got on a call with Bernard, who's one of the founders. And yeah, he's like, my dev team might be blocking you anytime soon because I've got some scrapers doing stuff. But it's fine. It's all good.
Part of the process. You're pushing it to its full potential. I want to talk more about your journey to SEO actually, because you've been doing SEO and analytics previously before founding the because you're one of the co-founders of the agency. And how did you find out that that was your niche, that you wanted to go all in on technical SEO? Maybe you could talk a bit more about that journey.
Sure. So yes, I've been doing SEO for 14, it might be 15 years at this point. What is time? Prior to that, I was actually a front-end engineer. So I did a lot of coding, and that was before we even called ourselves front-end engineers, right? We were just web developers or web designers. But that's what I did to help pay the bills in high school and college. Of course, the bills in high school was just I wanted to buy a car or something. But yeah, so that's what I did prior to going into marketing. I've been agency side for most of my career and have been usually in SEO. I'm super lucky I've gotten to sit in kind of all of the different channels, including even video production. But SEO has always been kind of my favorite and the one that I come back to, because in that way it's people are looking for answers. And so there's just something about that that feels really authentic. And I like to talk about how the role of SEO is just to start conversations. That's all we're doing. So the technical side of SEO, that just kind of made sense from my dev background. That's why I do get into the nitty gritty. That's why I do love talking about code. As an agency at Grayed Out, we talk a lot about JavaScript and rendering. We take on a lot of those projects, and it's just been a good fit because of the dev background. But yeah, ultimately, I feel like SEO has been the least spammy of the marketing things, maybe bold words. Although I feel like I should also caveat when someone says spam, I'm Hawaiian. So I'm like, spam is delicious pork.
Eh,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Love that. It's amazing. It's in a can. Great
Yeah,
marketing for spam, by the way. I love the
it
marketing for
stays
spam.
good forever. Like, come on.
There's good spam as well. So
So all of that to be said, yeah, it's been the one that I always come back to, because to me, at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is figure out what people's questions are and answer those questions in whatever format they expect the answer to come. And there's just something really fun and genuine about that. And it's fun.
how do you feel that the space has changed because you've been in this industry now 10 to 15 years? Where do you stand in the, because let me give a bit more of a breakdown of where I'm going with this question.
Okay.
Initially, when all the LLMs landed, the conversation in the SEO industry was focused on answer engines are the future, more, terms like everyone was throwing out a term of how the future might be. And then the pendulum swinged back to all of this is just SEO and based on the backbone of SEO, especially if you know how these LLMs are actually rendering data, or how the data was trained initially with the models and before accessing information through the RAG model of getting external information. This is it's based on SEO. But now the conversation, I feel the pendulum is swing back to people sort of almost scaremongering that it's not SEO. We
Mm.
need to be prepared for AEO because they probably did not like how the conversation shifted. Where do you lie in this debate?
So that's a question I get all the time, and I love it. So yes, I have seen a lot of change in this industry. The number of times I have read an article that starts with SEO is dead, it's really hard to take seriously anymore anytime I see it. So overall, I do think a lot of the same things that we should have been doing this whole time as SEOs, it does end up being good for the LLM, the answer engines. Yeah, whatever term you want to put out there, I'm not too precious about terminology. They're still the same. It's still about answering those questions and doing it in a genuine way. Like, at the end of the day, what people are looking for is authentic interactions. And so that's why things like UGC have become so important, and brand consistency, because in our day-to-day human interactions, those are the things that matter and help us make decisions with brands as it is. So all of that to say, I don't think what we need to do is going to change that much, because I also am being an optimist that these LLMs, these tools are going to continue getting better, because there's definitely some places here, or like some tactics that I've seen some people talk about with LLMs in particular, that harken back to like pre-Hummingbird days or just pre-Penguin, pre-Panda, whichever one you want to do, which I got to say Hummingbird and the launch of semantic search was just like, that was single-handedly the biggest change on what my daily life looked like. I mean, having to create separate landing pages for like commercial refrigerator versus refrigerators, like there was a reason words lost meaning pretty quickly when you were an SEO 10 years ago. So it's a little bit of a digress, sorry.
But good to know, good to keep people informed of how things work.
Yeah, I mean, we used to, it was bad, right? Keyword stuffing, it worked. And that's what people are seeing working now with some of these LLMs, putting white text on a white background. It's unfortunately working. But my hope is that just like Google, these tools are going to get better and they're going to recognize those spammy things, that is ultimately going to hurt brands. And especially because if you're doing that, it's not like Google stopped caring about it. So you may be risking penalties or just lost visibility on search, which again, we see traditional search is actually impacting AI visibility because of those live fetches and how the data set itself, how the models are continually learning. So it feels like there's definitely some places in the last year where we have kind of regressed as an industry of, hey, let's try this, let's try that. And I love the SEO. It's always been people who want to take risks, who want to learn. We are inherently curious people. If you were to talk to a paid team, their curiosity looks very different than an SEO's. So, I think that's something that is magical about us, but I think sometimes we let it take us in places where it's just, if we were to stop and think, is this giving the right experience? Am I doing this for my users? I think there's probably a lot of these things that would probably stop. And so I think we have to keep coming back to that question of, is this for my users? And that's why I think ultimately between AI visibility and traditional search, they're going to be very much the same tactics, the same kinds of strategies. It's just going to be a different lens, like the Google monopoly is ending, which is kind of exciting as a consumer, but obviously terrifying as a marketer, because now we have all these different things to adapt to when as an SEO, we're already wearing 40 hats anyways. So it should be fun.
So why not just add a couple more?
Yeah, why not?
I love that
It's
you said
totally
that.
easy.
You make it seem easy. You make it seem easy. With all these multiple hats and also learning all these different platforms, I guess you gave some really sound advice. The fact that we have to refocus on the users, and that's not going to change. So if you ever go too far or you're getting overwhelmed with the hacks that are out there, it's good to just kind of maybe quiet the noise, go back to the basics and be like, is this actually helping the users discover us? Is this in line with our brand? Because I think there's also a lot of information out there that can be very overwhelming with all the changes that are going on. And you are in a position where you've seen the industry change. You also understand things from a technical perspective. What advice actually would you give to people planning to join SEO, become a technical SEO in 2025? Someone that's been in the other digital marketing department and then realizing, hey, it's kind of fun over here, but what do they learn right now?
So I think it's still going to be about the basics, right? Make sure you have that clear understanding. And the basics are going to be, how can search engines and now LLMs, or really their agents, how can they understand the site? I think that's always going to be the biggest thing. I also say there is a lot of like you said, there is a ton of information and knowledge to gain, but I would say there's probably a lot of it that you don't need to have to be a good tech SEO. It's kind of the same argument as, do technical SEOs need to know how to code? No. And actually, because of things like Claude and ChatGPT, which Claude's definitely my favorite for coding, you definitely don't need to know how to code anymore. Like that's always been a way that I felt the industry has tried to gatekeep, which infuriates me to no end. And I'd say it's the same for LLMs. There's some really foundational understanding and how they understand sites. And there's also a ton of people running these tests and it's magical. But I would say, do you need to really understand how RAG works? No, because at the end of the day, to get the benefit from RAG, it's about, are your concepts clear? Are you telling a story? Are you being consistent in that? Can the user understand, right? It's going back to the same things we've done in content marketing as it is. The whole idea of chunking. I don't know why I put that in quotes because it's a real thing, but I'm like SEOs who are like, oh, I have to chunk my content. Okay, go back to what's the best way to inform? What's the best way to lay out all of this information so that a user can understand it? That's going to be your best bets. Do your UX testing or your focus groups, because that's ultimately going to be what helps. Also, I do think there's a little bit of we need to recognize as an industry that there is some traffic that's just not coming back. It's just gone, right? We are fortunate we work with a number of publishers, but those are the conversations that we're having of like AI overviews, AI mode, ChatGPT. They're answering these questions. That traffic is not coming back. It doesn't exist anymore. But what does that mean you need to do? How do you need to shift? How do you make sure you're better converting the users you're already getting? So all of that to say, as a tech SEO, and this is just SEO in general, try as much as you can not to get distracted by the shiny thing. Or there are some really brilliant people sharing incredible things, but if it sounds like it's going to make your head explode, or it takes you 40 minutes to read this article because it makes no sense to you, it's probably okay. And I mean, unfortunately, the ones that I've seen like that, I'm like, they didn't really say anything that's actionable anyways. Yeah, easy takes.
We love the spicy take. It's the real take. So
Because it still just comes down to, are we doing the right thing for the user? And from a technical perspective, is the site readable, right? And I will say with LLMs and their agents, they don't render JavaScript. So the only time they're actually getting any content that is dependent on JavaScript, it's going to be because Google has rendered it or Bing has rendered it and they're getting it from the live fetch. So really go back and say, all right, of my content that I'm requiring JavaScript to execute, is this my priority content? Is this the most important pieces? If so, get it out of the rendered HTML, make sure it's in your response HTML and not requiring JavaScript to show up. It makes tons of changes really quickly. Or even just, are there options you have of, can you change the rendering method? Can you go to server side? Could you use like an isomorphic? There's just a ton of things that as you learn as a technical SEO, which by the way, I would not expect a beginner SEO in tech to start getting into rendering. But once you do start getting into that, look at the different options, talk to your engineering teams, and really identify what is the priority content on your site, because it is never going to be every single URL. It is not every element that's on that page. Have a really honest conversation with yourself about what actually matters and make sure that you're doing the work from a technical side to make that as clear as possible. And that's where we usually see the gains. Because when we're making Google guess, when we're making LLMs guess about what's important to us, they're going to guess wrong. I mean, not always, right?
hallucination.
Sometimes they get it, but
Most of the
yeah.
time. But
Yeah.
that's great that you brought up JavaScript SEO essentially, which is also something that's gained a bit more importance. So it's been on people's minds a lot more, I would say, this past year with the rise of LLMs, because it's becoming increasingly important how you work with JavaScript, and in presenting your information and how these LLMs, these agents, these bots are scraping this information. I would love to talk more because you also have an article about JavaScript SEO that you've written, which I thought was really informative for people as well without a non-technical SEO background. It's quite interesting to know the architecture and how this works, understanding client-side rendering versus server-side rendering. I would actually love to ask you if you would like to demystify certain things about JavaScript SEO and give non-technical marketers maybe quick introduction to what it is, why it's interesting to them. I think you've mentioned that as well in your last reply, but just a chance to get people on board so that you're also not super overwhelmed by the terms out there, because it can be quite intimidating.
It's a lot, right? For sure. Yeah. So I think the important things here. So 2018 is when Google introduced JavaScript rendering. So I will say prior to that, if you had content that required JavaScript to appear, Google had no idea about it. So that was definitely a game changer. And there were times where even at like me working agency side, I would tell my clients, you can't have any JavaScript. It's terrible. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. And we're even seeing, we specialize in JavaScript SEO, so we get a lot of people who are migrating platforms and things like that. But you can absolutely have a successful site that relies on JavaScript. So I do want that to be one of the biggest points, is that we have seen plenty of major brands who do not see declines when they move to a JavaScript platform. You do have to be smart about it, but it is possible. The other things about that to know, the way that Google has it, it's got the crawl queue, which is really just going to be whatever HTML is received as soon as a URL is requested from the server. And so that's what we call the response, versus the rendered. That's after JavaScript has been executed, any kind of scripts. There is a separate queue for that. So you might already have pages that have gone through the crawl queue, but maybe haven't gone through the rendering queue yet. So if you're saying that Google's not understanding things, they seem to be missing content, that's one thing to look at. And yes, we've We've published tools. We actually have a Chrome extension called the Rendering Difference Engine that helps you visualize the difference between what is dependent on JavaScript versus what is not on your own site. So there's a ton of tools out there, including our resources, to help you kind of figure that out. And then from there are all different kinds of rendering options depending on what your site is built on. So client side is going to be one extreme of this of the rendering options, and that's where you're requiring the browser or the user's system to execute everything. The other extreme is server-side rendering, and that's where everything's happening on your server before it's actually presented. Can get really expensive. So there's some nice things in the middle that make it not so expensive for brands, but ultimately is about, I'm saying ultimately a lot today. That's interesting. I don't normally say that. I like it.
Favorite word for the day.
Why not? So it comes down to the priority content about your page. What's coming through the response versus the render? If you have canonical tags that are only showing up in the JavaScript, that could be problematic because that means it went through the crawl queue and sees one. Did we change it on the rendered? And suddenly there's a mismatch. And so it can be confusing for obvious reasons. Things like your title tags, the main body content, your internal links. Is Google having a hard time understanding or seeing all the pages on your site? That could be one of the reasons why. But things like a footer or a sidebar CTA, those being in JavaScript, it's usually okay. It's fine. And of course, the flip side being LLMs and their agents. So if you're seeing like a ChatGPT bot, not to be the same, not to be confused with Atlas, because that is a little bit different. We're still testing and learning about that right now. But like the Anthropic bot, all of those, they don't inherently render JavaScript. So they're only getting that JavaScript-based content when they're pulling from the live web. And it's unclear how often they do that versus rely on the training data and things that they already have. I know there's a lot of studies coming out trying to determine that, but I'm seeing a lot of differing numbers. That's why I say like, take everything with a grain of salt.
And what are you subscribing to?
Mostly that I don't have an answer yet. I'm one of those people who's totally fine with saying, I don't know. And we'll find out because right now they're just black boxes and there's only so much we can know that I think to try to say I know anything more than anybody else is just probably misleading and not true.
And the most sensible thing you can do is be honest in this time and
Well,
not add to the confusion.
yes. And it still comes down to, it's all about managing risks. It's about, are we willing to test and try things? Because that's also always been true in SEO, is that what works for one brand or even one line of business doesn't work for the other. So it's always about testing. That's what it's always been. Again, that's what makes it so fun and also sometimes really challenging and burnout.
Exciting.
But yeah, at the end of the day, rendering can get really complicated, but it's about understanding what is requiring rendering to be seen. And that's what you need to get to the heart of as a tech SEO. An interesting thing, which can get really fun in weird ways. So traditionally, Google ignores any kind of comments that are in code of your page. LLMs do not. So we've actually seen circumstances where, like, I feel like I can say this as a developer. So developers do some weird stuff in comments. Like I've seen one where someone was talking about how their coworker, Richard, they think he's an idiot.
I see.
And it was in the code comments. And so, yes, theoretically, any user that went to view page source would be able to see that, but it never got noticed until doing brand analysis. It was like, well, Richard's an idiot at this company, apparently. And it's like, poor Richard. What did he do?
I love that.
Or like even, I think this is a national story, like Uber got all of their internal project names leaked. So be careful about what's in your comments because, we haven't had to worry about it with Google, but with LLMs we do. So that's been an interesting one to figure out, like where developers were maybe having fun or like Easter eggs or April Fool's jokes. And unfortunately, it has impacted the perception of the brand.
You stumped me at the fact that a developer is using their code as a burn book for their colleagues
all the time. Yeah, no, we're weird.
I love
we
that.
do all kinds of weird stuff.
Unfortunately, it's being broadcasted, so you need to find another avenue. You need to find another place to sneak it in. I wanted to ask, you mentioned Atlas and how your strategy is a bit different there for your clients, because obviously it's also more risky because you do work with these highly regulated industries and companies that are in this industry. How has how has the strategy advice changed for Atlas? Is it different from what you were doing before because of all the bad press that Atlas has been getting because of these agents going rogue? How are you managing visibility for
Yeah.
these industries on Atlas?
So I would say Atlas, I called it out because it's definitely acting a little bit more like a dark horse versus the other LLM bots that we've analyzed. Of course, it does seem to be emulating Google and Bing results, and it seems to be built off of Chrome, which I think is an interesting decision, especially given DOJ conversations that are happening right now. But this is actually one of my favorite things about AI and how it's impacted. I do think there's been almost a resurgence of the importance of server logs and log files. So we have been doing a lot more log file analysis, whereas honestly, for 7, 8 years before this, like log files went away. We didn't talk about them very often in the agency world. Like, to be completely candid, I only learned how to do log file analysis in like the last 3 years. We had projects where we did it before, but my partner usually handled all those because she was the one with all of the experience. So it was like, I don't even need to bother doing it. So now I'm actually onboarded and doing it. But that's a way to have a better understanding of how AI bots are interacting with your site. We don't have a search console or a webmaster tools portal with these platforms. So that's going to be one of the best ways that you can understand how are bots interacting with your site. What kind of content are they consistently coming back to? And that will help you to kind of gauge what they think is important. Like, are they spending a lot of time on page 20 of your blog? That's a sign to me that we need to investigate, and probably something's going weird. Do we have a lot of in links to this 20th page for no apparent reason? It's stuff like that. So I would say that is one change. But when it comes to Atlas, we're still in learning mode. And so seeing with that user, what are they doing? How is it different than our normal users, so that we can try to understand a little bit better of what's going on under the hood. Like I said, there's still black boxes. There's got to be a lot that we don't understand. And I think it is important for people to understand as well when it comes to LLM answers. You could ask the question and then 3 minutes later use the same exact prompt and it's going to be different. And then tomorrow when you use the same exact prompt, it's going to be different. The person next to you, it's that understanding of this is not like traditional search. So it's more about what is happening directionally and not in the moment.
It's very, very good, like summary of it. We'll check back with you in a couple of months if you'd like to
Okay.
get back on.
Okay. Sure. Sounds good.
And tell us about your findings. Would love to have you back. I wanted to actually ask you maybe a more optimistic question, but a tinge of pessimism. Looking 2 years ahead, what are you most worried about for search, and what are you quietly optimistic or excited about?
What am I most worried about? Environmental impact. Personally, my power bill increasing because of these AI data centers, right? Things like that. And just, you touched on it, the fear mongering, right? Or it is the gatekeeping of, you have to learn all about RAG and you need to understand this and chunking and vector embeddings. And it's like, it just seems to be a way that we're trying to scare people at a lot of times. And I do think there are people who are genuinely out there trying to educate. But then I think there are those who are using it as a way to be like, I have all the secrets. Make sure you hire
Hire
us.
me.
And I
Yeah.
just don't, I don't like it. And that's why at Grey Dot, we give all of our content away. Like all of our blog posts are like 3,000 to 6,000 words because A, we're very opinionated and we have a lot of thoughts. But B, because we also, we don't think there's a secret sauce. The secret sauce is, did you do what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it? That's it. So, I think unfortunately we're going to continue seeing that, but that's been part of SEO since its inception, which has just been kind of the reality. What am I optimistic about? So I have to say, I have a 9-year-old son, and watching how he interacts with these LLMs, and I monitor all of his prompts because I'm also a digital native. So he doesn't get away with anything. But seeing how they're interacting, him and his friends, that's been really fun. And it's been really interesting to see how different the patterns are of like me being a millennial versus how he uses technology. It's fun to watch how that evolves. So I am optimistic for that, seeing how these tools continue to help our lives. Like I just used ChatGPT this morning to come up with like a 4-week meal plan. Like that's great. Imagine like the amount of brain space that is saved with things like that. So yes, I'm excited to see how these tools continue to get better and refine. But I do think they've got an uphill climb on building trust, right? If you look at not marketers, the trust levels are not as high. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be fun to watch regardless of how it goes.
I wanted to just shout out your blog once more. Grey Dot has very valuable resources, easy to read, because you guys do break down these very technical concepts that are scaring people away or being hijacked by people trying to sell them their expertise. And it's good to sort of it's a great resource. So I love your blog, and I wanted to just pitch it even more.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We
Well,
also did do an entire course on JavaScript SEO with Sitebulb. It's completely free. There's 4 sessions now, so it'll take about half a day to get through. But yeah, we do all of the educating on JavaScript SEO, and then the 4th session we actually recorded a couple months ago, and that's all about the impact with LLMs. So you can access
love
all of that
that.
for free.
Nice. And also I loved your take on how your optimism for your son using LLMs. My son's, yes, 17 months officially today, but we made it. And I'm afraid of the day that he will have to use an LLM, which is not too long ago. Because as a parent, you're very afraid of giving them access. But it's also nice to know that you're going to sort of interact with it, sort of like a buddy, or like to see.
Yes, yes. And it's definitely like there have been some sleepless nights of trying to figure out how do we talk about this, like teaching my son how do you validate data, right? Because he doesn't inherently know that they hallucinate as much as they do. I've definitely seen it happen. He'll watch ads on YouTube and he'll be like, Mom, do we have this insurance? Because this ad said it's the best. I'm like, no, no.
Not all for the propaganda.
It's not how this works. I forgot you didn't grow up with commercials, so you don't know that they're fake. Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. So just know with your 17-month-old, the ads are going to be way more effective.
And more
So
realistic, that they think that this is like how the world works, and this is the
yeah,
land of the law of the land.
yeah. So
Gosh.
it has been interesting. I guess I am seeing too where as a parent, I have to push on him to critically think for himself and not just immediately go to search or to chat GPT to get the answer. And I even have friends who are college professors who are saying like that's the biggest problem they're seeing right now is the critical thinking we need to augment as much as we can so that we don't end up in the world of Wally.
The critical thinking decline is steep, and it's happening.
Yes. But I do think it is a powerful tool. And I mean, we're seeing it. We use it all the time, right? To make our lives better, to give back brain space. So I think as long as we're cognizant of that and we're adding safeguards, it's exciting. But
We can have a whole episode on this, actually, like,
okay, I'm
how
in.
to how to educate the kids, how to educate the youth, on navigating the LLMs, because we're adults are figuring out, but we also have some inherent knowledge of how marketing works, advertising works, and how to not be susceptible. So
Yeah.
everything for them looks super native and almost like natural and seamless, that they can be hijacked very easily, just the way that list can be hijacked. I think this is a good time to move to our rapid fire round to get
Okay.
your AI hot takes. So let me start with the first question. What's the strangest or most interesting thing you've used an LLM for?
Mm, strangest thing. Probably just modifying chocolate chip recipes so it could be gluten and dairy free. Like I don't use them that often other than in my personal life or to help with coding for
Okay.
work perspective. So, we'll push on things for clients, but I'm a big fan of using machine learning models for what a lot of people are using LLMs for. So, my hot take, I guess, on that is that I don't actually use LLMs that often.
And what machine learning models do you use? Would you like to give us some use cases and some examples?
So it kind of depends on the use case, but this is one of the things that does make it so magical. Machine learning models are trained to do specific things and they do it really well. So, for example, any kind of like topic modeling or keyword clustering, BERT topic is so good. It also works in multiple languages and not just English. And you can use it for free using Google Cloud Platform, or you can do a notebook in Google Colab and then just use Claude to write the code for you. So, but BERT topic is one of my favorites that I use more often than probably any others. But yeah, it just depends on the use case, will depend on what model. Um, I know you got to talk to Brittany, who is phenomenal. I got to take her course, and I have to say, one of the things she gave us as a resource was this decision tree of what kind of work are you trying to do. And she points you in the direction of what tools or what models are best suited for this. Honestly, that is worth the course fee in of itself. So everybody go take it. She's brilliant. She's wonderful. But I do like those ideas of using the models that are built for it. Because also this way, I'm not putting any client data in ChatGPT or a Claude. I'm doing all of that in Python notebooks or in R. And yeah, so everything still stays confidential.
That's a very good tip, actually.
Thank
This is how you sort of safeguard it. Yeah, like AI is not just LLMs.
you. Correct.
you you have ML models, and if you are, kind of anxious on how on using these LLMs and the security risk, getting familiarized with these MLs, so important. But damn, my next question was going to be, what's your favorite LLM? So I guess, do you have a
Well,
favorite? You're not really on
well,
your rotation.
yeah, I mean, I do like Perplexity because of the sources. So I have found when I'm trying to get like a reasoning answer, Perplexity is usually my favorite if I want creative tasks. Like I used it the other day to help me come up with titles for a presentation that I'm doing. Because I'm not a creative person, I'm a dev and an SEO. Like there's like my creativity is not in wordsmithing. So ChatGPT, I think, does a great job at that. And I actually have a ChatGPT. Trying to remember which model it is, but like that's what's hooked into my Notion so that it writes my emails for me, but in my voice.
Oh, so this is your automated workflow. I love
Yes.
that.
Yeah. I use Notion for email, for schedule, and for all of my note taking. So it kind of all goes together. And
And then you also
good
automate
job
it
of
to
putting
fire
like,
out. Sorry?
yes.
You were saying?
So Notion does a good like because of all the content it has, it does a good job of capturing my voice. And then Claude for coding all day, every day, hands down, it's Claude. Sonnet is the
Nice.
best.
Oh, Sonnet specifically. Nice.
Yes.
What's one SEO task you never want to do manually again?
Keyword clustering, forecasting. Yeah, I'm never going to do those manually again. I also haven't written alt text or meta descriptions. Now, part of that is also we, as an agency, we're usually consulting versus executing. So we'd be really expensive solution to write you meta descriptions. But yeah, I can say that if that work were to come through, I'm not doing it. Like that's probably a terrible stance for me to have. But I'm like,
No,
no, someone else on my team can
no,
do
fair
it.
enough. You're speaking for the people in SEO. You're saying how they truly feel. What's one, no, yeah, most overhyped SEO trend in the AI era?
Chunking.
Is it not just formatting?
Yes, it's formatting. It's making good content flow, right? Like table of contents or jump to links at the top, putting summaries. Like, come on, y'all. We've been doing that for a hot minute.
What do you expect from marketers?
That's true. That's true.
One AI feature or product you wish existed.
Oh, what a good question.
Take your time.
I'm trying to think what are the most annoying parts of my job because it would be mostly like on the agency admin side.
Hmm.
So I wish I could find an AI tool that was actually good at drafting proposals.
Okay.
I've seen
If
some
not,
people try and it hasn't helped.
I would assume that's the most popular thing that people love using even some LLMs for, right? But there's no you've not found something
Yeah,
that
and maybe
helps with it.
it's just because of our needs, like, we do everything custom,
Mhm.
so maybe that's part of why it doesn't work, but, like, I've tried the systems and it's terrible. Or resource planning. Why is it so hard to resource plan?
And I would love to get back to, yeah, what are the pain points? What lacks in your proposal, in these proposal making tools or these systems that you've tried out? Why do they suck?
That's also a good question. Why they suck. So usually we're a time and materials agency. So with the proposals, I'm also putting like hours to the different things that we're going to do. They're really bad at estimating those, even though I have like entire databases of here's what we quoted here and all this stuff. It's not good at LLMs are traditionally not good at math, right? They've
That's
been
true.
putting in things to be
So it's
better at
more
math.
the timelines that they can't really like
Yeah.
predict.
Yeah. But then it ends up all being the same that any kind of custom or like new kind of things that I even put it in the prompt. It's like, no, I'm just going to completely ignore that.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's probably great tools for the more classic agencies, but that's just not us. So, I'm probably asking for something that will never exist because of how custom it is.
That it's easier to just get it done yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Most underrated AI use case in SEO right now.
I think there's a few things here. So, I'm going to go back to what you said of AI is not just LLMs. So people not using machine learning. Doing forecasting becomes so much easier. And forecasting is just, if you can present that to a leadership team, they eat it up. they love it, right? And it can also make running tests really easy. So trying all these different things, I think that's an underutilized application of AI. But I'd also say even just the work of doing AI visibility analysis to figure out where people don't understand your brand correctly or what it is that you're offering, that has ramifications across the entire organization. So I think not stopping and doing that work is a huge missed opportunity.
And you mentioned this forecasting, the ability to forecast with machine learning. And this is something I think you also mentioned in MOSCON, because I saw your slides and you had that really beautiful graph
Thank you.
that you did for your clients. I love the fact that you made use of ML to sort of do that, because reporting's also changing, right? Like, a hot metric for the longest time was click-through rates, and that's been declining, and you want to also correct for that. What are maybe your top three metrics that you find to be the most important for your clients right now?
So of course it's still conversions and conversion rate optimization. Now that depends on the brand, on how realistic or how tactile that metric is. Or like in the case of the Fed, their conversions are just people being educated. So like, how do we track that? And then I do think tracking clicks in GSC is still like, it is not the end all be all. And I don't think it ever should have been. But I think it's still something very important to understand and really start digging into to understand the trends that your site is seeing. And again, just the understanding that users and agents have of what it is you offer. I will say SEO Gets is a free tool that makes running some of that analysis really easy. Highly recommend it.
Yes. SEO GETS?
Yes. Yeah. It plugs
Nice.
into
Check
your
it out.
Google Search Console and allows you to start slicing the data in smart ways without having to build your own like Liquor Studio stuff that just gets crazy and bonkers and slow really quickly.
I see. And also a whole other learning curve, right? So this sort of helps you make it a
Yes.
bit easier. Nice.
Yes.
So is this one of your favorite? Because my next question would be favorite tool you didn't expect to love.
That definitely would be one of them. Yeah, I think that's probably where it would stay. Because like just recently, I do love Claude Sonnet for coding. It has, even though I can write code using Cursor is what I use, and sometimes just the changes that it can automatically make for you, like saves so much time and just the boring work that coding usually has that I can't imagine. Like I built the Great website. I can't imagine building that without it now.
Wow.
So
To do it from scratch without the help of these tools.
yes.
In 6 months from now, what AI capability will change SEO significantly?
I think in 6 months, we're going to start seeing the AI visibility tool race finally start to calm down a little bit. We're going to see some winners. So I think that will ultimately help us change the conversation on what metrics are we tracking, because it's going to be according to, who's the top three that actually everybody's using. But
What's
I
your
think
top three? Sorry, what's your
top three tools,
AI visibility tools? Who do you think is going to stand the test of time? If
well,
you'd like to
especially since they
speculate.
they just dropped their announcement on their Series B funding. Profound is definitely going to be there. I'd like to see Bluefish there, and I think they're quiet but getting some of the biggest names, so I think they'll be fine. And then I'm intrigued by what SEO Clarity is doing. I think they're approaching it from a really thoughtful perspective. So, but yeah, I think because of how expensive the Ahrefs add-on is, I don't expect that to reach the same level of success. I don't know if I should have admitted that, but I did.
Thank you. Thank you for that, T. Very
Yeah.
appreciate it. If AI vanished tomorrow or turned too costly, which part of your workflow breaks first?
Just drafting emails and personally my meal planning. Yeah, like I said, we don't use LMs a whole lot. You know, we do use machine learning all the time. So if that were to go away, then yeah, a lot of things like forecasting, I have to start going back to like statistical modeling without models to do it. That sounds like it would take a lot of work. But those things have also existed for 10, 15 years. They're not new so much as just the learning curve to use them. The onboarding has been greatly reduced because of AI.
So they're more accessible, actually. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, those would be the biggest places where my life would get a lot more manual again.
Finally, one word to describe the future of SEO.
One word. Ah, dang, that's okay. I can do this. I can do this. I'm going to say selective.
Would you like to add some context to that word? Because that's the first time I've heard someone use this as an answer.
So I think we are going to see, it's going to be another point in the industry where the snake oil salesman and the true doers, there's some separation, and the snake oil is going to get riffed.
And this will be across all industries, actually.
I think so. I think I really see this as SEO is maturing. We're reaching another level. Like, we're a young industry when all is said and done. And so we're just growing up, and this is going to be another growing up point, which is painful. So it's going to be painful, but ultimately, I think for the better.
It's a good purge.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Sam. Is there anything you'd like to shout out? Your agency, the work that you're doing? You mentioned the course as well.
No, I think that's really it. Like, check out the course. We give away a ton of free resources, and just be on the lookout. We'll be publishing new content and trying to educate as much as possible. So